Peeps, we are back at it with the NLX2 Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the NLX2 Podcast. If you're new here, shame on you for not coming earlier. If you are a returner, we appreciate you, and things are getting spicy around here. I'm not talking about this nice handlebar mustache, okay? Super Troopers called. They asked for a main role there, so I thought I would start working on chugging syrup and building the handlebar mustache. All jokes aside today, our podcast guest, Mr. Luke Summers, formerly with Power Athlete, original OG of Power Athlete back in the day in California before they made the big move to Texas. And Luke had many roles in Power Athlete, many responsibilities, and today go over kind of the life cycle of a coach, okay? Going from starting out, being that young whippersnapper, not knowing anything, going along, learning the process, all the way to now, him branching out, doing his own thing, going to Kidstrong, and following his passion, what he truly believes that he is good at, he's the best in the world at, and he can help the most amount of people. And so today, we will go over all that. And I hope you guys enjoy this. If you guys want to catch up with Luke, Kidstrong, check that out. Come to the NLX2 Podcast, listen to it. And we have a doozy today. It was an absolute blast getting to talk to Luke Summers. And so, without further ado, I give you the Mr. Luke Summers. Exactly. We're always recording, always recording. So, NLX2 crew, we did a quick introduction of our guest today, someone who rocked a very decent handlebar mustache in his day. And very excited about this. I'm glad, selfishly, I set this podcast up to learn from this individual. And so without any further ado, I'll just have you kind of introduce yourself a little bit, Luke.
Sure. My name is Luke Summers. I am currently the Director of Programming and a training and certification, or Kidstrong trainer, or trainer for Kidstrong HQ. And Kidstrong is a private childhood development training center. We have an epic collection of gyms. Every gym's focusing on brain, physical, character development. We work with kids who can hit that like walking milestone. So that's like, 11 to 14 months. It varies, but from walking, they have to be relatively independent up to 11 years old. And, the curriculum that we put together on this programming team is steeped in research and science. So it's science-based. It's parent-focused, which is a little different for anybody who has kiddos and kids programs. Like, we want parents to want to show up. And then, it's taught by pro coaches. So that training and certification team I'm a part of has a very high standard and high expectations for the coaches that we have in place at our centers around the country. So that's my new gig, man. And then before that, worked with John Wellborn and Tex McQuilkin over at Power Athlete as COO, helped John start that sucker up back in 2011, 2012 is when I jumped on board, and we kind of grew into what Power Athlete is today. And I made that transition from Power Athlete to Kidstrong in January of 2021. So January of this year.
Man, it's been a lot of things happening in that short period of time, my man. My introduction to Power Athlete and all this, I had a good buddy who I was a young whippersnapper, didn't know my ass from my head. I mean, it was ugly. And I'm training at a huge community center, and he's like, dude, listen to Power Athlete. And this is when you guys are balls deep in CrossFit, like balls to the wall, man. And this is when the trash trucks are coming by during the podcast, like the good days. And so it was cool that molded a good portion of my early years in, I don't know if it's good or bad, but I never had experience. I never dove in and drank the Kool-Aid of CrossFit ever. It was always performance. It was always strength conditioning at the collegiate level. And so it was a good change up. And so that was in like 2014. And then became a Block 1 coach in 2020. And from there it was it's just been cool because that early years getting to not even know you guys, but feel like you guys are part of the group and really formed a good portion of my career. And so that was kind of my introduction to you guys. That was real early. So in 2011 is kind of when you were introduced to John, correct?
Yeah. No, so it would have been, so my first flavor of Wellborn would have been 2008, shortly after CrossFit football launched.
Oh, okay.
So before Power Athlete, John had stood up a program called CrossFit Football when he was working with CrossFit HQ. And at that time, I was working at a CrossFit gym as a part-time coach at a full-time gig, corporate America, and was moonlighting an early morning coach, right? So I'd hit the 6 a.m. in my shirt and tie, coaching people how to do wall balls or whatever, right? Pop off, put in a 9-10 hour shift in corporate and behind my cubicle. And then I'd rip out of there and go straight to the CrossFit gym and coach till 9 p.m., rinse and repeat 5 days a week. And I came across Wellborn because you said something for better or worse with CrossFit. I don't think it's CrossFit's fault. I think it's the, your entryway into this space is your mindset and how you approach a training system, whether it be CrossFit, whether it be Orange Theory, whether it be whatever, collegiate strength and conditioning, whether it be, Joe Ken's tier system, whether it be 5-3-1 and Wendler, whether it be conjugate method. Like, I came in and I sucked the marrow out of that CrossFit thing. And I thought that was the only way. Right. And that more was more. And this is 2007, bro. So there's no, it is CrossFit forums. There was no podcast, dude. There was no, you had CrossFit forums. That was it. And that community was just a little echo chamber of how awesome CrossFit was. And is I'm not mad at CrossFit. But at that time, more was more. So I just did more WODs. I did more paleo. I did more no carbs. And bro, what I ended up doing is I just starved myself to get shredded and look the part. But in parallel, I was playing flag football with my homies back in Chicago. That's where I grew up. And I was just getting worked on the flag football field. We started as a beer league, but then we started to get pretty competitive,
Yep.
So then as we're getting competitive, my WOD times are getting epic, but my ability to play flag football is kind of tanking. And my buddy, I remember getting tea kettled one day, and I played offensive line. So I was playing center, and I was probably 189 pounds, down from 230, right? So I leaned out a ton, ab veins, everything you would ever want. Well, I got tea kettled, and my homie, who's a bigger dude, he goes, this whole male model thing has got to stop, right? He just looked at me. He's like, this is over. You got to stop this. Stop starving yourself. He's like, I got the solution for you. And it was CrossFit football. And that was a training system that, in John's words, would say virally infected the CrossFit space. But at that time, there was no structured strength work in CrossFit. It was all varied, constantly varied, to the point of, I would say, random. It depends on the location, but to the point of random. And that's not suitable for sports. So I followed this CrossFit football thing, which was steeped into periodized strength work, and it had movement selections. It had time domains that replicated that of power sports, which flag football is. Followed that for 6 months, put on 15 pounds of lean mass, ate like a savage, and I got a lot better at flag football. Shocker.
Yep.
And then I became a zealot at that point, and we got John and the crew out to my gym in Naperville for a seminar, and that's when I first met John in person, was at the CrossFit football seminar. And I remember thinking to myself, it was Johnny, it was Rob Ruiz, it was Ben Oliver, it was John's now wife, then girlfriend Kate. Man, we had 40 people at that cert. And I remember going through that cert, Colby, and I remember thinking I felt lied to. CrossFit lied to me.
Yeah.
But in actuality, I just wasn't ready to learn. I was ready to be told what to do.
100%.
And that was a learning experience for me as a coach, more so an athlete, to realize, structure isn't a bad thing, and that you kind of got to reverse it, right? CrossFit is a training system that's for everyone at that time. But CrossFit football would say, well, what are the demands of your sport? Let's reverse engineer it. And it's just so obvious to me. So then it had such an impact on my life. And I talked to other people, and I'm still talking to people who I took that cert with. And it just changed the direct trajectory of our lives as coaches and as athletes. And I'm like, I want to be a part of this thing. And shortly after that, John had a blog at the time called Talk to Me, Johnny. This would be 2009 or 2010. And he posted a blog post, which is not connected to the subject, but the title of the blog post was, "Are you hurt or are you injured?" And, he used to post weekly, and there's been like 4 to 6 week delays in between his posts. And he had a little blurb in this post that was like, "Hey man, like, I hear you guys are jamming me up. Where are these posts?" He's like, "My life is going on off the rails right now. I got twins on the way. My office manager just got a new job opportunity at my gym, CrossFit Balboa. CrossFit football is absolutely blowing up." He's like, "I'm spread thin, so I'm just not going to be writing too much." And he had a line in there, something like, "If you know anybody who wants to work super long hours and get paid real shitty, like, shoot me their resume because I'm hiring." And that was me at that time. I was ready to get out of corporate. I wanted to go all in on running a gym, CrossFit gym specifically. And John had a thriving CrossFit gym in Southern California. Again, just Chicago guy stuck in the Midwest, suffering through cold, frigid winters. So I threw my name in the hat, and he remembered me from that seminar because I was such an active participant, and that just got that conversation started. And then I was fortunate enough to get the job offer, which, yeah. If anyone's listening to you, that's also Power Athlete Radio listener. Tex and I did our origin stories. I couldn't tell you what episode it was, maybe 209 or something like that. Mm-hmm. But it was like a pretty crude offer, which was ultimately, "Hey bro, like, world's your oyster. You can come in here and you can make impact. The job is yours. That's all I'm promising you." That was enough for me to throw caution in the wind, move across the country. And man, the rest is kind of history. If you guys have listened to my story through the couple hundred episodes of Power Athlete Radio. But that was that point where, like, there was an opportunity and a high level of risk that I had to calculate to determine whether or not, is this the life I want to live? And back then it was probably purely recklessness, Colby. Like, looking back, if a young man presented me this, and I was his mentor, let's say, he's like, "Hey, here's my 2 paths. Which one do you think?" Mm-hmm. Like, where nothing is assured, no promises, I have to do everything, or like this really plush life, I'd probably have them meditate on it a little more to make sure they're confident they can make impact. And I guess I was just fortunate enough that, or dumb enough, or hard enough, or smart enough, or a little mixture of everything, that when I hit the ground in SoCal, like, I hit the ground running. And man, I was ready to push. I was ready to pull, claw, dig, and fight. And yeah, man, Power Athlete was born from that little spark of inspiration.
Yeah,
right?
Man.
So
and we all have it to some extent. Like, that's why we're in where we're in. But like, what was that intrinsic value that you held for strength, for training? Like, where did that come from? Because, and you said it, CrossFit is the tool. Misguided or not, it's the tool, and that's what they're going through right now. I mean, there's a huge transition, and they've come a long ways, and that's why I say, positive or not, I just never got into it. So where did that value for strength and training come from?
Tricky question, man. Like, and there's a larger discussion here as well. Now, I'll start with that, I guess. Dude, 300 had just come out. There was a generation of young men who were just kind of soft because there was no answer for training other than like upper body splits, lower body splits. Performance-based training wasn't really even a thing in muscle mags, right? Like, there just wasn't a ton of stuff out there about working out, right? So Facebook's starting to get popular. 300 comes out. Gerard Butler looks like an absolute, like, just piece of work, and everyone's like, "I want to look like that." And this Google thing, there wasn't a ton out there, so there's one source, and the answer was CrossFit, right? So now you got a bunch of dudes, like, I'll just speak to the Midwest, right? A bunch of dudes that are like in this corporate life. They buy a car, they buy a house, they work, they have car payments, mortgage payments. They're probably former athletes or some sort of team sport guy. They're not going to the military to get that camaraderie. Maybe they're in men's league basketball to get a sweat on, but then you go into this dingy CrossFit gym. I mean, we're just a few years after Fight Club as well, right? So it's like 6 years after Fight Club, which is like a monumental cinematic experience for men in my generation. And dude, and it's just like, it took over social media, and it was an experience unlike anything else. And, I think people back then, and even like people probably now, right? Like work is work, and you kind of trudge through it and you do it because you have to. It's very rare, I think, in the normal people world, normal people, I don't consider us normal, like that people are like, oh, I love going to work on Monday morning. Right. So you need that outlet, and CrossFit gave me that outlet, and it was like camaraderie. I got in shape. I felt good. There's a very real chemical reaction, like that endorphin rush of doing that type of exercise. And like you start to look good, right? And then your friends are there. So like it replaced that church vibe.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It became the lifestyle. So now, then, that where the things changed a little bit and became performance focused is going back to my roots. I grew up an athlete. And it's like, well, man, I don't want to be training purely for vanity. Just me personally, my values. But there's dudes that do. They're like, I just want to look jacked, dude. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not mad at that. But for me, it wasn't me. So I'm like, all right, so what are the most functional, hate that term. I shouldn't say hate. I mean, that term's really overused. But for me, what's my why? Well, I want to be big, strong, and fast. I want to dominate. Right. And then this whole concept of what I was looking for ultimately presented itself within the power athlete paradigm as athleticism, where it's the things we're doing in the gym are for you to achieve a level of performance that you can call upon at any time to achieve something new or novel, right? Like, and that's where I think, in retrospect, thinking back, like that's what I want to be able to do. If I was going to join a pickup basketball game, I want to dominate. If I was going on like rec league dodgeball field, I want to dominate. Like I just want to dominate in sport and competition. Cause that's like participating in team sports specifically. Like I'm not really an individual sport guy, but I just wanted to be a contributing member to a team. And when that came into the framework of sports, man, the dude who's the fastest, strongest, and best mover, and has like a relatively high like competitive IQ, man, they tend to thrive, and that's what I wanted to be.
Yeah, man. We seem to, and it's a reoccurring statement that you're saying. We seem to follow our unit and like want to be a part of that, something that's bigger. And first and foremost, that was CrossFit for you. And then transitioning into power athlete, you really found that. It was homegrown. It was John and the boys. It was just very, very deeply rooted. And so you seem to found that unit. And so the early years in power athlete isn't what it is today, but that's what built it there. And so like, what were some of kind of those challenges when you made that leap from corporate and burning the light at both ends? How was that transition into power athlete in the early years?
Man, so at that time, like the first thing, I guess I didn't realize how bad of a coach I was. Right? I was like,
none of us do.
Cheerleader, 3, 2, 1, go, time, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Right? I was counting reps and motivating, which is like are important parts of like working with clients and running a business, right? But then if you were to like put on your purist hat of being like an idealist coach, I didn't quite understand, right? So going out to work at CrossFit Balboa, there was a bit of a culture shock because the programming was different. It was strength focused. There was real coaching that was going on. So I had to learn that. So that was number one. Then number two, I wanted to go and get on the seminar racket, right? Like I wanted to travel with John and the crew and do these seminars for CrossFit football, travel the world. So then that was like, okay, so how do I ensure that we have a thriving gym? I do all my general manager duties as a CrossFit gym general manager. I get my 15 to 25 hours of coaching in. I create an awesome client experience. I train my coaches so that they can give a version of the experience that I want this gym to deliver, right? All while learning like the next level strength and conditioning jargon, not in like a negatory or derogatory sense, but jargon, like all the nuts and bolts that I needed to know to go effectively train John's power athlete training system, which was in the early days called CrossFit football, right? So it was just basically that. The challenge for me was just immersing myself, and being becoming that impassioned coach and that sponge and being humble. And at that time, at least, like, one thing I just couldn't wrap my head around was this concept of like everything works, but nothing works forever.
Yeah. Well,
it's like, hang on, I'm a technical thinker. I'm like, there's a system, there's a starting point, there's a middle point, there's an end point, there's a life cycle where things are appropriate. So that was like trying to understand that concept, and that's just like your classic. There's memes out there, something like where it's like age and time, and it's like what I think I know and what I really know,
yeah.
Right? And there's like this inverse relationship. So it's just kind of wandering that. I would say, reflecting on that, it was navigating that curve and that relationship between what I thought I know and what I really knew. Mm-hmm. So that's like 2011, 2012. But what made it a challenge as well is like John's a mentor there, right? And he had twin girls. So like any parents out there, first-time parents of a newborn, like it's kind of overwhelming. And if you have two, you might think it's like twice as bad, but it's not. It's 10 times as bad. Mm-hmm. Like there's like this compounding effect. And I wasn't a parent at that time. Like I just, had a kid 2 years ago, about 20 months ago. And I didn't have an appreciation for how much of a struggle it was for the big guy to like keep everything running. So like that was a challenge for me is working within his availability to have a quality mentorship and knowledge transfer so that I could get up to speed and help push it along. Right. Yeah. So I had a lot of drive and a lot of motivation, but just not a lot of know-how. There was a gap there to close. And we eventually did over a couple years. Yeah. But that's like that early phase, I'd say.
Okay. Because even from the outside, not being an employee of, being a Block 1 coach, they do a very good job. You guys did, and because when I took my block, you were still a part of PA, mm-hmm. and do a very good job of building you back up, but showing you that you're a lot dumber than you think you are. Like mm-hmm. we need to break that down so we can rebuild it up. And you get that experience at the symposium with all the great guests and great content that is there. And you get that at a real big dose at the Block 1. And so yeah. I gravitated towards that. It was that no bullshit mentality. It was you either have it or you don't. You either pass or you fail. You leave with a block mm-hmm. or you don't. And so I think that's why I gravitated towards it. And that's why the thousands of people that train with Power Athlete gravitate towards it. And so in those early days, and even as of January of this last year, mm-hmm. what were some of those keys to building the culture of Power Athlete? Okay. I know that it was a part of John and a part of his upbringing and his NFL career, but like, what was some of those keys to building this to where you're attracting the people you want?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. And it's going to, let's see, believe it or not, it was, we struggled early on because eventually what happened in terms of my perspective is like, I wanted to be this coach, right? This like master coach. And then I didn't. Right. I wanted to start a business. I wanted to run a business. And that's where you're going to see the transition of when we brought on Callie and we brought on Tex, and Tex really started to crack the bone and suck the marrow out. And he started to be that professor, that keen bean. And that's 2014, I want to say, 2015. And that's where I was envisioning like, all right, so we need some serious business horsepower. I'm going to take on that. Right. Tex comes in, he takes on the research side of things. Callie comes in and assists with that. But she takes on like the educational side of things in terms of like leading seminars, how to lead seminars, assisting with seminars, and then ultimately launching that podcast, right? Which is Power Athlete Radio, premier podcast, strength conditioning. So early on, I'll call it luck, I guess. We had John and myself would like. We were just kind of kindred spirits after there was this knowledge transfer and we got aligned on our mission. Like it was just about being authentic and not trying to be anyone else that we weren't. And like, if you spend a lot of time with Wellborn, the man, like, and if you listen to podcasts, that dude can talk and he's got stories and he's got positions and opinions and experience. And he comes from a very, very accomplished family and very intelligent family. And they talk a lot. And I guess I said that like 3 or 4 times. But the point being is, if you're around and you're listening, there are such rich gems that come out, right? And in that time frame, like 2012, 2013, 2014, there's a lot of blogs going on. There's a lot of writing. We came across a dude in the UK named Harry Heptonstall, who runs the branding and apparel, right? Well, he came in, and what he was able to do is like, same thing. He identified with the tone of voice. He identified with this ethos that is this power athlete ethos that I think is very unique in strength and conditioning. Like it is the humble professional, but it is also like the confident and relatable expert, right? Like these dudes know what they're saying. They're humble, but they're confident, right? And he was able to encapsulate that and capture it and help us turn that into a brand. And in doing that, like, you know, there's a lot of branding literature out there if you're into that type of thing. But one of the things that started to take a foothold at that time is this concept of the story brand, where, you know, you're not investing in the product, you're investing in the story behind the brand, or you're identifying with it. And man, we just had a lifestyle, right? And we said, you know what? And this is kudos to John, because I wanted to conform, I guess, is how I would identify it. Like, we need to conform if we want to scale. And one thing that I value out of John as a leader and being part of the team is, one of the many things is, like, that dude told me no more than he told me yes, which I think is a sign of a good leader.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to put words in his mouth. My suspicion would be, because he knew I would come back harder and I would come back better after a no.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I'm just going to say no, push this guy out and have him give me a V2, give me a V3, because it's only going to get better. So with that said, what I'm getting at on that is, like, despite efforts to try to, like, I don't know if I would say commercialize or hit mainstream, but lean into that market, because I wanted to grow the business. You know, John was the anchor in staying true to what the brand was, which was a piece of him and a piece of our relationship too, like he and I and Tex. So, and Harry. So I guess I think my gut tells me is it's just the authenticity that, like, there really wasn't here. You know, our job was to give people the best information that we came across. Our job was to deliver it in a way that, you know, a 10-year collegiate strength coach who has his master's in kinesiology and all sorts of credentials could pick up and respect. But then at the same time, the dude who's coming right into the space, maybe fresh out of college, could also connect, and they both could hit the ground running and use it.
Yeah.
And do it in an entertaining way that wasn't so like science class, right? And then our job was to, like, give young athletes different skill levels, and even former athletes, give them the best programming that they could hammer out at home that's going to make them a more athletic version of themselves that they can attack every day and not, like, dig themselves into a ditch. So when we start to break it down and simplify it that way, like, we were just trying to serve the people who followed us. And I think that's where we built up a strong loyalty. And once people work their way through maybe the hard edges and the skulls and the black and the white and the profanity and, like, the firm opinions and then the non-answers, they kind of got to the core of the nucleus of what Power Athlete was. And is like, hey man, we're just trying to empower performance. We want to make people better. I don't care what, like, if you know your goal and you just do what we say, you're going to get better. And then we're not asking for a lot out of you. We're just saying, hey, follow the plan, right? Do what we say. And then I think when it works, people go, oh, okay.
We see what you're doing. You guys did a really good job of, you could say marketing, but
sure,
putting out to all different types of people. The collegiate strength and conditioning coach, the Joe Schmo with the garage gym, and everybody in between. And so those people all dove into it. And I find it interesting because my perspective is from the outside as well. And you can tell yourselves these stories in your head as power athletes going along. And it makes sense, though, John was this, in a good term, John was this anchor that had his vision, what he thought it was going to be, and he brought you guys on to expand that to some extent. And it was kind of a combination of all your guys' perspectives with the roots of kind of what John was doing. Does that sound kind of correct?
100%. It's like a big hunk of Wellborn, a dash of Luke, a pinch of Tex, and like a nice creamy layer of Harry Hepton salt, and then like with a little bit of like all of our other influences, personally, and, like my influences, John's influences in his life, Texas, and then all the people that have contributed, like, the original plank holders of this thing. Like it's a big goulash of all of those perspectives and values, and like, yeah, and just packaged up and weaponized, right, to create this thing. So
for sure, and seeing the evolution from the outside is pretty cool too, man. And you guys don't. What's the saying? You don't know it's the good old days till it's done. Like seeing it from the outside is really cool. Seeing it from day one till now, and then how did your role start to transform as we start getting to the later years of you and Power Athlete? How did that kind of change?
Sure. As the business grew and we offered more services or products, or new larger scale customers came on, or as we would consider shifting the type of service that we would provide, like that all filtered down to me first for a stress test. So it was very much risk analysis, SWOT analysis, reporting as well to understand the health of the business, like kind of just like good old operational fundamentals. Like it didn't matter if we were slanging shirts, if we were packaging up like bourbon, it like no matter what the industry was, it was just making sure that we operated profitably and efficiently and ready to scale at any point. So there was a few blips on our radar as an organization, and this isn't really kind of banging weights type talk, but there's a few opportunities where it's like, okay, we need to grow this company in 60 to 90 days by 600%, like headcount. So how are we going to do that? Right. So that, boom. So then there needs to be a war board in the play ready to call. And that's where like I had a heavy role in that. So then, in addition to that, as we started to really differentiate ourselves and get into more advanced techniques and training and education, Tex did a great job of piecing a lot of this together. But then my job was sometimes to pull the reins, and you can kind of hear it on the podcast a little bit, right? Like Tex is really that, like in the weeds, very technically proficient, like strength coach, purist coach. And then you have the big guy who's like this high level, highly accomplished, at some points unrelatable, like larger than life figure. And then I was just kind of like the everyday guy, right? So whenever it came to a product like that, that was my lens that I would look through as well. So we all complemented each other as the business developed or new opportunities popped up. And, there's some pretty big projects behind the scenes that we definitely tackled. But it wouldn't be a big brand builder. So we never really promoted it. Right. Yeah. So that's where my role really evolved to.
Yeah.
Just making sure the machine ran.
For sure. It was a perfect storm of a collection of all you guys. It really was, seeing that from the back end. What year did you guys end up making the transition from California into Texas?
So that was 2016.
Okay.
So we moved in 2016, and that is also when, like, I would say 2017 was when also the Power Athlete Symposium, which was meant to be just kind of like a little, like, box type event. When I say box, kind of like CrossFit gym type event, it went to a venue space, and then we saw potential. So 2016, 2017, 2018, then, you mentioned the Power Athlete Symposium. That was our annual event. And then that went from like a 4-week project to a 6-month project. So then I was running that as well. Like that was my side hustle, my baby. And that role evolved quite a bit because it became a major production, and we learned a lot of lessons every damn year, man. And the bar got raised every year. And I guess that's where in 2019, right? 2019 was our last one, and it was awesome. Like one of my proudest achievements as a team was that 2019 symposium. And that was also, we brought on like 4 people to help run that event too. So like then it's now managing that staff, right?
Yep.
That production staff, the talent acquisition staff, and then the sponsors and all that stuff. So like the role became much more of a leadership role when it came to that executive producer of the symposium. And then the podcast really ramped up too. So we started right around COVID time is when we started to ramp up the frequency of recording, and we realized the impact that we can have through that podcast. So in terms of the role there, then like that COO kind of shrank a little bit, right? And then it became like, well, we need to lean into this podcast. So that role came up. And then this symposium grew as well. So those became really the 3 pillars of what I was doing for the team.
Yeah.
In addition to making sure operations are running, and then also certifying y'all when you came out to the block ones, getting those things ready. You know, that event in itself is typically at like a 14 to 20 day ramp up just to get everything ready to rock there. Personnel trained, get everything on the ranch and ready to rock, walk through new segments, right? Put into play things that we learned from previous block ones.
Yep.
Every event, everything we did always came out with an AAR, always came out with changes in policy and protocol. So like I was the guy who would like lay those in and enforce those.
Yeah. Well, it showed. It definitely showed, like, especially for the block one. And then I was there for the last symposium, the last one as of now. And it couldn't have gone, obviously there's stuff behind the scenes, but from a consumer, it couldn't have gone any better, you know, like shit was fucking clicking. East Austin Athletic Club, correct? Yep. So that was a great portion to have there. Things just seemed to click, and the back work was there, and it was that great mixture of. And do you think that was probably your favorite symposium you guys had?
Proudest one, you know, probably not my favorite. I'm pretty hard to please, dude. So I'm like, you know, I guess I get called a contrarian. I consider myself a natural skeptic, but I know we always could do better. But what was nice about it is it was like it was the truest brand experience we've ever laid out.
Yeah.
Right. Like when it came to the guests, it came to the talks, it came to the floor plan, it came to the coaching practical. Like it was at its core the closest it could have been to like what is Power Athlete? What does Power Athlete do? Mm-hmm. Like that symposium was a beautiful little microcosm of like the brand, the people, the attitude, tone of voice. So it felt like a big win.
Yeah. And then from the outside, this gets us to kind of your latest and greatest transition. But from the outside, becoming a father, transitioning into that role, I could see from the outside this little bit of perspective change, a paradigm shift, you know, like you really started diving into what you're doing now, really looking into early childhood development, looking at where you could have your impact, where's your why, you know, you were really diving into that.
Yeah, totally.
And you didn't throw it out there on Power Athlete. You didn't do that. You weren't giving it away, but you could see this shift, you know, and for the positive. And so very selfishly, I introduced you earlier, and I had you on this podcast so I can learn too. I'm in that early development of starting a family and all that stuff. And so what was it having a kid that ended up being the catalyst to where you're at now, or has that always been intrinsic in you that you wanted to work with kids?
I don't know, to be honest with you. And that is like a bad behavioral pattern of mine, is to kind of lean back on that. But I don't know for sure. Let me just start there. Number one, becoming a father absolutely does change your perspective, right? One of the projects we were working on at Power Athlete was a project called Fuse Move, functional and useful movement systems for everybody. And we were trying to get into the PE space in Texas because elementary, middle school, and high school PE programs in Texas and across the country are like a travesty right now, dude.
Yeah.
And like even working with the military at a large scale, tens of thousands of soldiers, and talking to military leadership, there is a buzz that the nation's number one security risk is how out of shape future soldiers are.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's no base level or value on just general physical fitness for our youth. Now you have athletes who are just studs, and like athletics is thriving. I think youth athletics is at its pinnacle right now. It's the best it's ever been. But what percentage of kids are athletes? Right?
Yeah. Very small, man.
Not a lot. Right? Not a lot. And then how many of those high performing athletes, what percent actually can like build a career out of it? Not a lot.
Yep.
Not a lot. Okay. So now you start to look at that distribution and you realize there's a huge issue. Now, I'll tell you right now, the schools are not the villain here. They're just in a very tough spot because their funding comes from the government.
They're in a bad system. Yeah.
Many of them are government institutions. They've got to fulfill government obligations, which are mostly in the traditional subjects, reading, writing, arithmetic. Like physical education and acing your physical ed program is not going to get you more funding, right? So the paradigm needs a shift. The schools can't make it happen quick enough. So that leaves the private industry, right? And what I've come to learn is the most critical time to instill life values. Like you want to create, as a father, at least I do, I want my kid to be a valued member of society who is eager to contribute and it carries high character.
Yeah.
Brave, calculated risk taker. There's all of these character traits that I'm hoping my daughter will have when she hits her adolescence and her adult years. Well, it comes to find out, most of the research is telling us all that shit happens. Colby, that shit happens before 5 years old.
Shit.
So you lay that framework in the first 5 years, right? 90% of the kid's brain 90% of the brain development of a kid happens in the first 5 years. Then the next 5 years, up until 10, their brain waves are in like this dream state where you can literally just brainwash them to believe almost anything. And then that little nugget, what you implant in there, creates a ripple effect the rest of their life, their whole life.
And their kids'
right?
lives.
100%.
Yeah.
And generations after that. So like you think about the magnitude of that. And as a father, like what is your job? Is it to bring home food and money and stuff? Maybe, right? Like that's what my dad's job was. Like, hey, I just got to bring home a paycheck. Your mother's going to take care of the rest. And that was that generation, which is fine. I'm not like, I have no resentment towards that, but we're smarter now. And in my experience at Power Athlete, the impact we can make on dipshit dudes like you and me, who are like, have very little plasticity. Like you can't like, a cheetah doesn't change its spots. A zebra doesn't change its stripes. Like there's some truth to that in older dudes. Can't teach an old dog new tricks. But we do. We have this system that shifts the trajectory of adult fitness for adult athletes and puts them on a better track for the remainder of their life.
Yeah.
Why not like use that power with kids, And that's what I realized, and what I was doing for my daughter as well is like, I went on a little journey of self-discovery. I'm not a religious dude. I don't want to. And one thing, I picked up from John too, and I agree with him. He's like, I'm not going to rely on the schools to educate my kid, right?
We've heard that before, yeah.
Yeah, man. Like, and I have no problem with anyone who's religious and finds meaning through their faith, and the church guides their morals. Like, I get it. That's text. And I respect him and his decisions. He's a great man. He's one of my best buds. But like, that's just not the route I want to go. And maybe it's my ego and me being stubborn. But what I realized is like, I want to be the best version of myself, because I'm a version of my old man. I'm a version of my mom. So my daughter and my kids, my gaggle of kids, I'm thinking like 10, maybe 15, who knows? Like they're going to be a version of me. So I got to get my shit together. And as I started to do that, you ask yourself these questions like, what is my why? What is important to me? And I realized that the impact I was making and could make through Power Athlete was important. It is important. But it wasn't enough for me.
It wasn't the biggest ripple effect you could have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just wasn't enough for me. And that was meant like personally at first, you know, in my own little party that's going on in my head and in my self-work, that was met with like a lot of friction. I don't know. It just puts you in a weird space to realize that, because you're like, did I just waste 10 years of my life? But like you come to learn, like, not at all, man.
Yeah.
The experiences are invaluable. The relationships I created are invaluable, and it's unique to me. And like, you know, it's my trophy case. Are the relationships I've made, the impact I've had. You know, there's a number of people in Power Athlete Universe who've reached out to me or I've talked to and had side conversations that like I've had the pleasure to create a positive impact in their life. Like that doesn't happen. That's awesome. Right. Mm-hmm. But as you zoom out, you know, was that enough for me? And it wasn't. And I'm thinking, how can I work efficiently? Because I know I'm going to do all this work for my kid. Mm-hmm. Right. And I know I'm going to be seeking out all these super sharp folks who are going to like have some answers for me. And then I just happen to have that opportunity and relationship with a guy who's doing it at scale for like across the entire country. Right. So Kid Strong right now has got 10 locations, and they started in 2015. I met the founders in 2013 at a CrossFit football cert, Matt and Megan Sharp. They're out of CrossFit Maximus in Lexington, Kentucky.
Okay. And
I've been in touch with them ever since and kind of watching this. They've got like 1 billion kids. No, they got 4 kids. You know, they made it, they created it for their kids because nothing like it existed. They knew they wanted this. Megan was a PE teacher, right? Matt ran a CrossFit gym and some other adult fitness and tech companies.
Yeah.
So there's like, you start to combine this and you see a huge opportunity, you know, not only in the business space, but like your ability to make impact in this world. And it just became more apparent. Like I didn't see it the first 3 years they were talking to me.
Yeah.
You know, 2015 to 2018, I'm like, I don't get it. This looks stupid.
Yeah. you had that tunnel vision where you were at.
100%.
Yeah.
I couldn't relate. And then, you know, I'm spending a year spinning my wheels. I'm like, what am I going to do for my daughter? Who am I going to be? Who's the father I want to be? And then I go visit with them again in one of their locations in Austin. And it's like, it's right in front of me.
Yeah.
You know? And that's where that seed kind of got planted. And I'm like, you know, I am power athlete. I bleed black and white, man. These are like the most important dudes in my life right now. And that's where I had a hard decision to make. And you just kind of lean back on a lot of the pillars of training, even the power athlete methodology. And you think of those in a global sense and apply those to life, right?
Yeah.
Stress to progress.
Yep.
I realized that things had gotten a little complacent for me because things were just so far in my wheelhouse at that point. And for me to take on a different role at Power Athlete, probably would have been more expensive than me getting hit by a bus.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, man.
So it's like, you know, I don't want to say like I'm a martyr for leaving or anything like that, but like I just had a hard decision to make, and it aligned with what my new life's mission was to become, and like raise the highest character kids that I can for me personally and my family. And if I'm going to do that, I might as well help create a system that can impact tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids in the country.
Yeah. And it's so much fucking bigger than we all think too. Like it's that ripple effect. You have those kids in the one location out of 10 and their kids and their grandkids. It's fucking overwhelming when you think about it, to be honest. Like I have it, and I'm sure you have it being a perfectionist too, but like that imposter syndrome, you don't hold yourself as highly as other people hold you. And you talked about like this different web of people that you've had an impact on, and it's just getting bigger from there. And it sounds like at that moment, it sounds so crazy, me being maybe a part of the posse, like how much I have really invested in Power Athlete from the outside. You had to ask yourself, like, what's important now? Like, what is my thing now? And there wasn't that end goal at Power Athlete from the sounds of it, you know? And it's it's really cool because I had a hard time hearing it. I had a hard time, like, if I was in that situation, what would I do? And it kind of gets you back to your why. And you talked about right now, yours is to be the best father, husband, person that you can. And I'm sure that's the role that me not even knowing that I'll form into as well. And like right now I talk about it. I told you I was speaking about it. And like, what's your why? It's not the fucking mission statement. Like, hey, I want to have an impact, like why do you want to have an impact? And all the people that have listened to this podcast before, I had absolute terrible run-ins with injuries and absolute terrible run-ins with pain medication, and took me down a really wicked path, man. Like just playing college football, just trashed off of pain meds all the time. And this was years and years. And so now, me being in the situation I am, I own a gym and I'm also the strength and conditioning coach at the university here. Like, I never want a kid to have to go through that. And this is just a little bit older period than you were in right now. But it's crazy the impact you don't realize that you can have if you really look at it on that 1,000 foot view. Don't look at it the 10,000 foot view. It's every conversation, every kid, every day, every session that you can have that impact. And just kind of doing my research, looking through Kid Strong and all that, like, you guys are doing some really cool stuff that honestly nobody else is doing right now. Yeah. Like that's, Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it is. And if maybe there's some parents who are listening to this, you think about your kind of your traditional kids programs out there and the type of, the business models and the strategies and the hiring strategies and, even organized sports. And I'm a fan of all of organized sports. Do not get me wrong. But the coaches you get out on that field are volunteer part-time coaches who have full-time jobs. And like, they're giving you a copy of what they experience.
Yep.
Now, sometimes that's good. Sometimes that's really bad, right? Like,
very much.
Because there's no structured or formalized training, man. So the cool thing about this place in the setup we have is like, dude, it is occupational therapy, pediatric occupational therapist, pediatric physical therapist, and you got like guys like me and gals like me who come from like performance-based strength and conditioning models, and you're building this brain, physical, and character curriculum that is like, man, that is age appropriate. You add the other type of character, like a little bit of fun, entertainment to it. And then it's our job to then roll it out to dozens and hundreds of coaches so that then they can impact thousands of kids. And like this top-down model, it is really impressive because every coach that comes into this center, if they want to coach, Colby, I mean, they're going through as rigorous, if not more so, field training as the block one that we put together at Power Athlete. It's bonkers. And I'm going through this and I'm like, because I had to go through it as well, like I had to get certified, and I'm going, this is to play with kids, and I couldn't, it was early on in my time here. I'm like, we're just playing. But then when you get behind and you start running the program, you realize that like, you need to have a high level of professionalism and a high level of like this coach's toolkit to be able to impact a 4-year-old.
Yeah.
Dude, working with adults is so easy. It is so easy. Want to know why? Hey, Colby, head over there, grab the safety squat bar. We're going to load that up to 135.
Done.
Okay. So that is 6 steps in a chain that you're about to do that you can understand. 4-year-olds, you have 1. You get 1. Mm-hmm. They can't really splice together 2-step instructions. So your communication has to be so dialed, so clear, and so concise. But at the same time, we challenge our coaches to put on a show for the parents.
Yeah.
So think of like Pixar, right? So Colby, do you have a kid? Do you have kids yet or no?
Nope. Just starting though.
Yeah, dude. Congratulations, man. Like, so when my daughter wants to go see a movie, like, I don't want to go watch My Little Ponies or some dumb shit like that, right? Like, I want to go watch some Pixar movie that like Toy Story that like is going to strum on my heartstrings. They're going to pull jokes that I understand, but also entertain the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that form of storytelling that the programming and curriculum team that I'm a part of here, like that's what we're creating. It's not sets and reps. Like there's a whole lot that goes into it. So we need to be able to train our coaches to be able to like consume this program, which is everything. It's music, dude. We do the music. We have specific phrases and lines. We control timing. We control floor plans and equipment, sets, reps, everything, right? And it's also gamified. Like there's ranks and awards, dude. It is like what Matt and Megan created here and what I've walked into is something real special. And I'm fortunate enough to help come in and influence the tech side of this thing with my experience with Train Heroic, which I love. I still use Train Heroic too. And following Power Athlete program. Like I'm still in tight. Like I am a power athlete to my bone, but like, I'm excited to be a part of this team and just see the impact you can have on kids, man.
Yeah.
And as a coach too, running these classes, dude, like I enjoyed coaching. Like if you were my guy, you're my athlete, and we got you up to your 500-pound squat, that achievement gives me goosebumps. The room's going crazy. You know, Slipknot Duality is playing at like 11 on volume. People are spitting at each other, like punching each other in the face. Great. But I'll tell you what, man, when you get a 3-year-old girl to do the monkey bars for the first time, and her mom starts crying and the girl comes up and hugs you and says, "Thank you, coach."
So cool.
Like, man, that is like, having kids softens you up, bro. Yeah. And that was like, those are special moments, right? Because we have kids come in here, like I said, they're not into athletics. They don't have the opportunity to get on the field and have a switched on coach like you, like use that as a platform to build character.
Yeah.
They're stuck behind screens, right? They're not socializing. And parents are worried about it too. They're like, what is my kid going to do? I don't know. He doesn't want to play sports. Where do you learn? Where else do you learn life lessons other than a football field, right? Yeah. Well, it's not. I'll tell you what. It's not doing ribbon dancing and playing kickball at the local patty cake program, right? Like Sharks and Minnows isn't going to teach you that. No. So that's what Kid Strong wants to do with our curriculum, man. Is like teach those values early.
Yeah. There's a lot more behind it than you would think, and from the sounds of it, you guys got a good thing going, man.
Yeah, I'm excited, man. So we got a lot of work to open up, a lot of traveling, a lot of educating, a lot of coaches, a lot of kids.
Yeah. Good, man. Well, I know we gotta cut this short, but man, I appreciate it. I really do. It was a blast, and it's really cool to see kind of the day in, day out of what you guys are doing there and the transition that you've made in your life, which is really, really cool. I can look down the road to my softer self here soon. So
yeah,
man.
But you can still be hard. You can still be hard and soft.
Oh yeah, handlebar mustache, drinking syrup. Yes, sir. I appreciate it.
Hey, Kobe,
this
is good, man. Yeah, happy to jump back on, man. I do got to bounce, but if you want to catch up in a couple months or whatever, man, ping me. You got my number
for sure. Tex is actually coming on here in April too, so we'll see how that shit goes.
Oh man, boring. You know I said that. No, man, I love Tex. I'm actually going to see him here in a week.
Oh, really?
This week, next weekend.
You're heading to the ranch?
So he's coming up. He's coming up to Dallas to visit for Easter.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad the crew's still clicking. You guys are doing well, man.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, it was. It's all good, man.
Awesome.
But thanks, Colby. I'll talk to you later.
Hey, have a good one. We'll talk to you later.